we go through a process of saying, are you aware of your leadership behavior? And interestingly enough, most leaders aren't aware on how their behavior impacts those they have the privilege to lead.
When you work with engineers, you end up talking a lot about product. Is there a product market fit? What differentiates this product from others? All that kind of stuff. Ironically, most leaders today, I would say, and most companies would say that it isn't the product that really makes a difference with a company. What really matters is whether or not you have a culture that can support that product and make it really effective out in the world. Today on the Leadership Launchpad, I have the absolute pleasure of hosting Garry Ridge. Garry is the former CEO of one of the most well-known brands in the world, WD-40. When he took over the company, he was charged with taking WD-40 from a US company to a globally known brand, and he did that, according to him, entirely by creating a culture that could support that product, that would help create a place where people felt like they could come to work and really be their best selves and do their best work. In this discussion today, we talk a bit about Garry's journey to being a culture-first leader, the importance of culture into making engaged and productive employees, and finally, why new leaders need to understand themselves first if they want to be the most effective leaders for their team. If this is your first time listening to the Leadership Launchpad, please make sure you subscribe so you never miss a future episode. And if you happen to be someone who is responsible for developing leaders in your organization, I would love to talk with you. Please reach out through matt@bettereverydaystudios.com so we can find out how we can make your leaders better. With that, let's get into the conversation with Garry Ridge. Garry, welcome to the Leadership Launchpad. I am so excited to have you. How are you doing today?
Good day. I'm doing great. Thank you. It's just a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for doing this. It's great to be able to talk about things that really matter, and you do that.
Yeah, and I know you do that as well, which is why I'm so excited to talk with you. I think I first heard you on Mike Rowe's podcast a couple months ago, and that conversation got me really excited to chat with you because you were the CEO of the company that made one of the most recognizable brands on the planet when it comes, from a product perspective. It's, arguably it's like, Kleenex, duct tape, and WD-40, right? Like those are all there. And yet the entire conversation, you rarely really talked about product, right? It was all about something else. And I come from a world, a lot of my listeners come from a world where, engineers love to talk about product. That's the key, the key thing. So how did you arrive at this understanding that culture is so important and so key?
Well, I think it even refers back to my latest book, which is called Any Dumbass Can Do It, in that back in 1997, when I was given the privilege to lead WD-40 Company, we were a very recognized brand in the United States. Our goal was to take the blue and yellow can with the little red top to the world. And from a marketing standpoint, with the help of, the folks at the company, we knew how to identify markets, make people aware, make it easy to buy. The thing that always went through my mind, though, was, we're going to be a global company. The sun is never, ever going to set on our company. And how do we then create a culture where people can act, make choices, and do what they need to do without what I would call quacking up the hierarchy and having to call someone in San Diego? And I didn't quite know how to do that. So long story short, I ended up enrolling in a master's program at the University of San Diego. And I enrolled because I went to a presentation and Dr. Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, the
Yep.
guru of servant leadership, was speaking. And he'd put this program together with the University of San Diego. And he said, most MBA programs get people in the head. We've got to start touching people in the heart. And he talked about the power of servant leadership. And I went, you know what? I need to do this. So I went back to school. And here I am 2 years in as the CEO of a US public company. I'm back in the classroom. And I learned all of the attributes and the positiveness of servant leadership. And I started to put it to work at the company. And momentum grew and our employee engagement grew and everything started to come together. And I just kept doing it. And, that's why I say that if you understand what needs to be in place to create a great culture and you're brave enough to execute on it on a daily basis, any dumbass can build a great culture. And dumbass to me, the word ASS refers to nobody's posterior or bottom. It really refers to, a donkey. So
Got it. Got it. Okay. That, I have to admit, I don't think I've ever heard culture talked about in quite that way before, though it totally makes sense. One of my top leadership books of all time is a book called Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal.
mm,
And he in that book uses the term shared consciousness a lot, where the goal is, the book is about his journey where he kind of became the head of Special Operations Command in Iraq. And they had all these excellent teams that, Navy SEALs, and they could all do great things, but they're all stepping on each other because they weren't thinking the same way or thinking about different things. And so it sounds like your goal was to use culture as a way to make it so that everybody in the hierarchy, like it was really influencing decisions. Is that right?
yeah, I think that, if you think about what are the elements that need to be in place when we talk about culture, do people know and feel like they belong? Do people
Mm-hmm.
know and feel like they matter? In fact, the work that they do makes a difference. Are they free to make choices? And they do that by having a compelling set of values that protect them and set them free. Is
Yeah.
there a culture of psychological safety where failure isn't seen as a negative? It's seen as a learning moment, as we talk about. And then finally, the fifth thing is, are we as their leaders not acting as managers? Because our job is not to manage people. You manage your bank
Yep.
account. Our
Yep.
job is to be a coach. And the role of a coach is to help people step into the best version of their personal self. So those are kind of the five things that I think need to be in place that build this feeling of belonging where I really do matter.
Yeah. And as you say, any dumbass can do it. So what are, if you know the right things, what are a couple of those first steps? When you think back to your journey, so you became the CEO, you weren't sure how to create this culture, so you went back to school. What were some of the first early things that you did to start changing the culture so you could have a 24/7 brand?
Yeah. Well, firstly, you had to have a people first mindset. So it was, you're going to be a coach, not a manager. You had to have a clearly defined, authentic purpose. Imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself. You learn
Yeah.
something new, you're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. So you need to have a hierarchical set of values. So that's the second thing. The third thing is you need to have certainly a great strategy, but you need to be able to execute that strategy with the least amount of fear. So you create what I call the learning
Mm,
moment. So purpose, values, strategy, environment is so important.
yeah, that makes, and I think, you use the word tribe a lot. I feel like that comes into play here about it's not, again, it's not about managing people, it's about leading people, but it's not just about leading people. It's you're trying to build a tribe. Am I kind of like doing that hierarchy kind of correct or making that
Yeah.
transition correctly?
Well, the tribal side is people want to belong to something. Remember I said number
Yeah.
one is, do you know and feel like you belong? The great
Yep.
thing about, the tribe is, and we called a tribe not because we were referring to any indigenous group. Tribalism
Yep.
goes back to the beginning of
Yep.
mankind with Ugg the
Yep.
caveman. But here's what is really special. The attributes of tribes, the number one responsibility of a tribal leader is to be a learner and a teacher. Your tribes don't exist unless the leader of the tribe is continually learning and teaching those within the tribe what they need to know. And if you look at tribes, I'm wearing a shirt today. It says Liku Liku. It's a little island in Fiji because we go there often. But I had the opportunity to talk to some tribal leaders there, and they were very clear about the attributes of tribes. Tribes have values. There's a state of belonging. They're future focused. They're looking to the future. There's specialized skills. You've got to have, people who do different things. They're warriors. They're there to protect and feed each other, and they celebrate. So by having a tribe and then being able to talk about those attributes, you're able to clearly, communicate with the people within the organization what we stood for.
Yeah. I'd be interested in your take. Kind of, I think the last few years we went on kind of an art of cultures that are, I'll use the word inclusive versus exclusive, though not necessarily, like I feel like there's some set of, taking a stand of saying this is who we are was almost frowned upon a little bit because like you're clearly identifying yourself. Or yeah, did you see any of that in the discourse over the past few years of how strongly can it, I guess a better way to think about it is, when you're looking for hiring people, say, there's a common phrase that people use. We're looking for culture fit. And that can mean a bunch of different things. But how did you see that discourse around this idea of affirmatively standing for something kind of means you're not standing for other things. Is there any kind of conflict there?
I think the challenge there is when they say culture fit, many organizations do not have a clear definition of what their culture is. Now, if
All right,
you
that's
said
right.
culture fit at WD-40 at the time, I could easily say, yeah, we're a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. That's what we do every day. And doing that, we need to have a clear set of values that we're all prepared to live, not just visit. And we're going to have attributes of learning and teach. You can describe, in fact, if you were to go onto the WD-40 website to the careers page, it's full of descriptions of our values and our culture. And we basically said, if this doesn't feel comfortable, that's okay. We're not for everybody. Don't
Yeah.
come here.
Yeah. Yeah, and that really reminds me of kind of the Netflix example as well. That's what Netflix does with their culture deck. And so, yeah, I think that sounds 100% right is the idea of culture fit. If you don't have a closely defined culture, it tends to be shorthand for almost like lazy hiring or hiring people that or hiring people with a certain background versus hiring for a well-defined outcome. How did you come to defining the culture at WD-40? Like, what was some of that process that you went through over the years?
Well, we again looked at those attributes, and I
Yeah.
remember looking at Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization. If you've seen the pyramid, the first two rungs are, is this place safe and does it provide to me? So we would need to make sure those foundations were in place. The third rung is actually love or belonging, and that's where a lot of organizations fall down because how do you create a place where people escape to instead of escaping from? The sad thing is, and the research from Gallup clearly shares this. There was some research that was out in January, and there's probably a later version of it now. That you know, only 31% of people who go to work every day are engaged. 17 of them
Yeah.
are actively disengaged. And we as leaders are creating that environment. So we want an environment where people want to go to work, not wake up on Monday and feel sick or work out how they can, create a reason not to go there. During
Yeah.
COVID, there was this talk about the great resignation. I wrote an article on LinkedIn called The Great Escape. I think people were escaping toxic cultures instead of wanting to go to a place that you escape to. And I write a chapter in the book where I talk about be a place where people want to escape to, not from.
Yeah. And I think, for anybody listening, any leaders listening, now is the time to do that. I was actually just listening to a podcast earlier today where they were talking about the idea that things were kind of coming full circle from COVID. Because I think you're 100% right. It was the great escape. People were escaping those cultures. People wanted to so desperately. Now, don't get me wrong, there's lots of reasons to want to work from home. I work from home. But, there was more of an impetus to it because you were escaping a place that you didn't want to be. And now there's lots of people who are finding, oh, wait, like I actually crave being around people. I work better working around people. Plenty of people do. Plenty of workplaces thrive in that. And so, with everything going on in the world, now is such the perfect time for a company to be a place to, you know, if anything else, like escape the world back to, rather than you create, if now is the time where a great manager and a great leader can have such a profound impact on people. Yeah, just because I think we're having kind of this like full circle moment from what happened with COVID, it seems like.
Well, 100%. And, I think the challenge leaders have is as someone is leaving the house in the morning and they're saying goodbye to their husband, wife, or significant other, they give them a high five and say, I can't wait to go to fill in the blank today because we are going to fill in the blank. Now, I agree with you. We don't have to be in the same place all the time. But when you think about it, creativity, challenge, relationships are built in person. Why do people get put in? What happens when people get put in solitary confinement? They go crazy.
Exactly.
So, and I know, in my journey of leadership, the people that I actually saw in action, how they interacted with people, how they treated people in person was a huge influence on how I saw them as leaders into the future. So
Hmm.
I think, this whole thing about you can work from home all the time, I think that's really, really dangerous.
Hmm.
Loneliness is one of the biggest diseases going on right now. We need to bring people back together, but we need to bring them back together to do meaningful work. That's what's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, 100%. And I think now more than ever, I'm so excited about what you're doing, why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. Because again, kind of with that full circle moment, I think we're just getting to the point now where there are people who entered the workforce during COVID or shortly before COVID and spent so much time working from home. And now they're getting to the point in their career where they're becoming frontline managers, first time leaders, and they have maybe never had the experience that most of us that worked in an office had of just seeing the boss walk by and check in. Their view of what it means to be a manager is Slack check-ins, weekly emails, tasks lists. They never got exposed to those other intangibles, and now is such an important time to kind of double down on that because it's obviously
Yeah.
would be a horrible thing to. It's such a key skill.
I learned a lesson from my daughter. My daughter is a dance teacher. And she said to me, Dad, you never put a dancer on Broadway until you've seen them dance off Broadway. And that is so
Mhm.
true. I looked at the people in my organization as if they were rehearsing the main event. So if I
Yeah.
watched them in rehearsal, I could say, okay, here's some areas that I need to coach you on to improve your delivery, your leadership. So when you actually go on main stage and the lights are on you, the spotlights are on, and the audience is watching, you can dance the best dance you can. And I
Yeah.
think that's our role as leaders, is to do that. That's the coaching and teaching part. That's our role.
Yeah. 100%. So I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of culture and mission. And, I'm blessed enough that I have always worked at organizations that had an incredibly clear and compelling mission. So honestly, I reached most Fridays kind of sad that I was taking the weekend off and I was excited on Mondays. I'm so happy for that. Lots of organizations don't have that. And the vast majority of even leaders aren't the top level leaders. You know, what are some of the things that a more of a frontline leader can do to create to whether it's to build a culture, create a tribe within their teams if there isn't necessarily that broader umbrella in their organization?
Well, they can be the best leader they can. So the first thing, I coach CEOs now, and I think I'm coaching 8 or 9 CEOs of medium to very large companies. And one of the first things we do is we go through a process of saying, are you aware of your leadership behavior? And interestingly enough, most leaders aren't aware on how their behavior impacts those they have the privilege to lead.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, are you aware of your leadership behavior? A great book to read is one written by my friend Marshall Goldsmith. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And in that book, he has 20 examples that he's found over his whole 40-year career of coaching some of the top people in leadership in the world. People like Alan Mulally, who was the head who turned Ford around.
Yeah.
And those 20 habits that are in that book, I had all of them at some degree of abundance before I realized that they weren't worth having. So as a leader, I develop someone. I'll get him here. Let me find him. This person down here. This is Alec, and Alec is
Excellent.
or Alice, the soul sucking CEO of Fear Inc. And Alec or Alice has some toxic attributes. First one is they have a big ego. Their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. They're a micromanager. They think they're corporate royalty. They want a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They have all the answers, even the wrong ones. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback and they don't keep commitments. So if you've got those toxic behaviors, you turn them into behaviors like, if you want to be a great leader, involve and love your people. Always be in servant leadership mode. You're expected to be competent, so be a forever learner. You're connected with emotional intelligence. I talk about that as you spend time in the stinky locker room. You're not corporate royalty. You're talking to your people. You're asking them questions like, are you okay? What's on your mind? They love learning moments that reduce fear. They have a heart of gold, but a backbone of steel. So it's not, this stuff is not soft. It's actually, people
Yes.
think this is the soft stuff. It's not soft. They're champions of hope. They know micromanagement is absolutely not scalable. They do what they say they do, and they treasure the gift of feedback. So those are the attributes that leaders need to work on to create great cultures. We'll get rid of him.
What do you say? What would you say of some of those? What are the most common challenges that you see? I mean, obviously everybody's different, but I'm sure in the amount of leaders that you've led and coached and worked with, have you seen common patterns of the most common things that traits that people are holding on to that they need to get rid
Yeah,
of?
I think ego. I mean, it's not about
Hmm.
you. You need to show your vulnerability. You're not perfect. That's important. Micromanagement. You want to run. That's why I talk about coaches, not leaders. A great coach. If you think of a great coach of a football team or any team at all, a great coach does not run onto the field and steal the ball when the player is about to score the goal. They spend a lot of time on the sideline observing the play and then having conversations on how could you have played better. A great coach never goes to the podium and picks up the prize. In bad leadership, they're trying to pick up the prize. So I think, and the other thing is, shut up. Are you a great listener? You don't have all the answers. So, get what I call bleeding tongue syndrome. Bite your tongue, ask the questions, and benefit from the knowledge of those around you is so important.
Yeah, and I think that's, in my experience, one of the best examples of what got you here won't get you there. Because I work with a lot of engineers who are moving up the ranks, and I had it described to me recently by a great friend of mine who I've just never heard it this well. Is like you spend your whole life being trained and desiring to be the one up at the blackboard, right? Writing out the answer, doing the equations, doing everything, and then you make the jump from individual contributor to people manager for the first time, and you're expected to be the person in the back of the room raising your hand, right? And that is a really hard leap. I loved I always love sports analogies around this stuff because there's so much, there's so much we can learn. But it is a somewhat imperfect analogy, especially for brand new leaders, because in so many companies today, they do still have individual contributor duties, so it's not that they're just the coach, they're also, on special teams, and they have to coach, the front line. How do you recommend people kind of manage that balance?
Yeah. Know your role. I mean, it's discipline, right?
Yeah.
What am I today? Am I a player or am I a coach? And don't get them
Mm,
mixed up. So again,
yeah.
awareness is so important. Is to just really understand, what is my role in this? Um,
Yeah.
which is, I reflect on that myself. When I was CEO, there were times when I was the player. When I was in boardrooms or in front of, investment communities or investors or, bankers or whatever, I was the player. Um,
Yeah.
and then there were times when I'm sitting in a marketing meeting and they're talking marketing strategy. What's going through my head is, oh, I need to tell you, I need to tell you, I need to tell you. But what I was saying to myself is shut up and let them learn.
Yeah.
Sure, be a guide if you need to, but understand what is my role here.
I love that. I feel like I'm going to add that in to like a pre-meeting checklist, kind of you can kind of just put that mark of like, am I the coach today or the player today? And
Right.
maybe it's not that clean, but 100%, I think it is totally. And again, especially for new leaders, there's so much. I do think for experienced leaders, ego becomes a thing, but especially for a lot of new leaders, I feel like it's insecurity. It's the reverse of that causes people to just want to talk because they keep feeling like they're trying to earn their place or show that they deserve this position. And very often, kind of, they're proving the opposite.
And the thing I would say to new leaders is take advantage of the three most important words I learned. I don't know. And be very comfortable. You don't have all the answers. You're there to bring out the best of others. You have experience. That's why you're in the role you're in. But you don't have to have all the answers. I remember an example many years ago. I was in a meeting in our office in San Diego, and I moved from Australia because I started with the company in Australia in 1987. I was with the company for 35 years in total. And in 1994, I moved to the US, not to be CEO, but to head up our international expansion program. And I was in a meeting, and the CEO was actually, then CEO was in the room. And I was listening to someone presenting from outside the company. And what was going through my head was, I have no clue what you're talking about. And I'm thinking to myself, what do I do here? And I thought, well, this could be a career limiting move for Garry. I put up my hand and I said, I'm sorry, not long in this country, but I'm not sure I understand anything that you're trying to share with us. And everyone in the room went, ah, because
Oh,
neither did anybody else.
yeah.
And obviously, it may have been a career enhancing move because the CEO was in the room, and I eventually got the nod as the CEO. But I think,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to say, "Hey, look, I don't understand this. I mean, I need to learn more about this," and I think that's really important.
Yeah. It's incredible talking to someone with your perspective, because I think very often we can make this really complicated. We can make this seem like we talk about terms like culture and executive presence and what does it mean to be a leader, and it can come down to just stop talking. Say I don't know. Ask your people how they're feeling. It can come down to just really simple, almost being a good person level things. That is what it means to be a leader, which is fantastic. I don't know if you have, you know, if there's one, the one thing you think everybody could do tomorrow that would help their team. Anything like that. Like what's some of the most common things that you see from your experience?
Well, again, I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, I'll direct them to the Dumbass quiz. If they go to my
Right.
website, www.thelearningmoment.net, there's a little button you can do a dumbass quiz. And the higher your dumbassery, the more effective you are a leader. And at the end of the quiz, I will send you a playbook of four things you can do tomorrow to start enhancing the culture within the teams that you're in.
Excellent.
So there's a little bit of homework there if anybody wants it. But I think that the thing that it comes down to is, what are you doing as a leader to authentically show people they belong, to authentically show people they matter, to give them a safe work zone to work in, so you're reducing fear. Let's take the word failure out. We don't make mistakes. We have learning moments. Do you have those values in place that protect people and set them free? And stop managing people. Start acting as a coach, because as the coach, you're there to help them succeed. And if they all succeed, you succeed.
Yeah. You've done a really good job, I feel like, of kind of reversing the traditional Peter principle into a good thing, where you get promoted to the point of your maximum incompetence and then you stay there forever. But if you treat it correctly, that's a good thing. If you recognize that incompetence, if you recognize that you're not the one who's going to make this whole thing succeed, and you you have to rely on your people, then you could be the best leader ever.
Well, you may laugh at this. Up until the day that I stood down as CEO, and I used to introduce myself. G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right, chairman and CEO of WD-40 Company, and I need all the help I can get.
I love it. I love that. Yeah, and clearly it resonated with people. Clearly it worked. And yeah, it's about, especially if you create that space where you provide that. I guess on that though, because as you were explaining that, I'm imagining a new manager saying that to their team, and I'm imagining there's a certain level of that works because of things you had done in the past. Does that, to like set the culture or set the tone? Does that kind of
Well, yeah,
sound right?
but I also think that as a new coach, saying to the team, "Hey, it's not about me. It's about, not one of us is as good as all of us together." So, I do have some competencies. Here's what they are. But we need to come at this together, because it's
Yeah.
by working together we're going to bring out the individual brilliance that's going to give us that pool of competency that's greater than anybody else's. So don't be
Yeah.
afraid to challenge me. Don't be afraid. Have fact, and have a degree of validity in what you're sharing. But let's make sure we don't leave anybody's brains on the table here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not about playing the dummy to play the dummy or anything like that. It's about being realistic about
Yeah,
what you
authentic
bring to
and
the table, but what everybody. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. This has been a fantastic conversation, Garry. You've mentioned a few times, your website and other places that people can find you. Anything else you want to point people to?
Oh, follow me on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn a couple of times a week, and hopefully what I post is of value. It's learning moments that I've had over time, and experiences, and things that I've found of value. So it's not fluff; it's real. And find me there, and on my website, as I said, take the dumbass quiz, and get yourself a dumbass playbook, and that's it.
Yeah, that I highly recommend everybody do that, because that's the kind of stuff that's extremely valuable, of external sources that can help you kind of question the things that you think but maybe you're not sure of. And it's even better. I love that you don't just, hey, here's your level, but it's based on your level and your answers, here's some things that you can do. That's incredibly valuable. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. Thank you so much to the service you're giving to the entire community of people who want to be better leaders. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along, and making the effort you do to get the message out there, because we have work to do. We have to create places where people go home happy, because happy people create happy families create happy communities, and happy communities create a happy world. And we need a little happier world, and it can all start in the businesses that we have the opportunity to serve right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Garry. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you are looking for help turning your organization's great engineers into great managers, me and my team at Better Everyday Studios would love to help. We deliver targeted and interactive training workshops that are designed to help build the 3 fundamental skills of any new manager: building trust, giving feedback, and setting goals. Reach out to me through matt@bettereverydaystudios.com so we can start making your organization better every day.